Hey, what's up guys? In this video I'm going to be dropping some knowledge. I'm going to be injecting some ideas into your brain, and I'm really going to be kind of going back to the beginnings of my production journey, the major realization that I had. And this comes from a time when Ableton had maybe 5 effects. Right now there's got to be at least like 800 here or something. I can't count them. But there's got to be a lot. And this came from a time, yeah, where there was only 5 or 10 or something like that. And I would drop them on a track and it didn't really sound good and I didn't know why. I was like, why is this so unusable? And it basically came from a time where I didn't really know what I was doing. So this is Ableton and this is a loop. So, I'd be like, that sounds pretty dope. I want to make it my own. So, what effect over here looks the coolest? Well, Overdrive sounds pretty cool. I'm going to drop that on. So, mind your ears. I'm going to mind my own as well. I drop it on and it would sound like this. And I'd be like, oh, that sounds awful. Like, what the heck's going on? Why would anyone want to use that? Thing is I had no idea how to use something like this. I understood the theory of it, but Overdrive, I was like, yeah, that should only be for like a dry guitar signal or something. Why would you want to drop that on a loop? And it took me some thinking, and I discovered, and this is the main meat of the video, is it's not a matter of using a single effect to its full power, but using multiple effects so subtly you can barely hear it. But having those accumulate, you get a really sick, cool sound. I don't know how that works, how that makes sense mathematically, but it makes sense mathematically, and well, not mathematically, auditorily, or whatever, chemo brain. So yeah, what I would do these days is I would essentially audition the track. Now, there's 2 ways to go about it. I'm going to show both ways. To do a thing, I'm actually a little too ahead of myself, so scratch that whole thing. I'm just going to set it to wet, 100% wet, so we hear the overdrive signal. So what I would do is play it, and I'd be like, that sounds like crap. I want to just kind of focus on one area. Right? So Overdrive, what it does is it basically smudges the sound, and in this particular instance, it compresses it a little bit. So you got basically some overdriven sound, which kind of clips things and makes things sound warm. That's where the term warm comes from. Overdriving things. And this is the sound of tape. Tape is actually a lot of things going on at once, including compression. Tape has a natural compression to it. People really love the sound of tape. Tape's pretty dope. Me and tape hang out on the regular. So I'm just going to find a little spot that I want to augment and smudge out. You're going to see what I'm going to do in a bit. This is all going to make sense. So we have a little thing here. We have a dynamics option. So we can kind of, I'm still trying to search for the word. I'm still getting used to this whole thing. But there's an abstraction, that's the word, an abstraction in Overdrive that allows you to have full control over the dynamics separate of the overdrive. So that's pretty cool. That's a really neat kind of German feature that they put in there. So with dynamics all the way to 0, we still have the dynamics. It's nice and transient-y. But on 100%, it's kind of smudgy, which is kind of what you want. And the drive will add more harmonics. It'll drive the signal in. It'll get louder a little bit. Right? Then we can dial down the dynamics to control the amount of that while still preserving the drive. See how it smudges that? That is the term warm. So from there, we kind of know what it sounds like. And yeah, I'm just going to go all the way to 0 on the wet dry. It's gone now. What I'm going to do from here is increase this just slightly so I can barely hear it. Notice how that mid part kind of has a bit more presence, is the word I want to use. Let's listen to it again. Right, and we can also shift up the tone a little bit. Alright, so we can bring down the dynamics and it loses a bit of it. You want it to be smudgy. You want it to be warm. So from here, I'm going to just give you another example. I'm still going to keep that, but I'm just going to have that down there as an idea. One of the effects in Ableton, when I used Ableton like way back in the day. Well, I still use it. But back in the day, there was an effect called Redux, and this effect is pretty interesting. What it does is it does some bit reduction and it does downsampling. So this will mimic the old school kind of drum machines that didn't have a whole lot of resolution and amplitude bit. The bit depth wasn't 16-bit. And the sample rate wasn't 44.1 or whatever you're using, 48K or like, a bunch of other big numbers I can't think of right now. So the ability to downsample would drastically change the overall tone of whatever you were doing. So let's check that out. So notice what it does to the high end. It affects the high end a little bit more than the mid and the low, and that's just the nature of the waveform that we're using. I don't really have the capacity, or it's outside the video scope to kind of go over what downsampling does, but just as an example, it drastically changes the sound. So from here, what I would discover doing is I do this in one of two ways, because the Redux does not have a wet dry knob like the Overdrive does, so you can't mix in the wet signal. But we don't believe in that, and you totally can. There's a few ways to go about it. I used to create separate channels and have the external in. I kind of do this and say do that, and then have this set to pre-effects, and then the in here. And what I would do is I would have a duplicate channel, which I have, soloed or whatever. But yeah, let's go back to this, which is an easier way to go about it. So say we want a wet dry knob for the Redux. I'm failing, but whatever. Is I would then group this, and this top chain would be the Redux. Basically, grouping allows you to group any like effect, VST, MIDI effect, into a group, so that you can collapse it and use macros and stuff like that. But it also has the added benefit of being able to add another chain, which is right here. So right click, create chain, and this is a dry chain. And then this is the Redux chain. So, holy crap, what can you do there? Well, you can mix and match and say, let's just leave the Redux in there. We'll bring the dry chain. We can solo this. Oh, because it's... Oh. Yeah. We can solo this, and we can have it set at 0 or negative infinity dB, and then bring it up to taste. So we're bringing in the dry signal mixed in with the Redux signal. Well, we might want to play both of them at the same time as we compare. Alright, so we still got a bit of that thing going on. Alright, so the clap has a bit more clarity. What I also want to do is just shave a bit of these things out. So from there, Let's go collapse that. Let's bring the volume down. I'll bring the gain down. Right, because the human ear has a really weird thing where it thinks that louder sounds are better. So I'm going to group these all up. So that includes two groups, a group or an effect rack within a rack. I call them groups because you right click and you group them. So whatever. So yeah, let's listen to that on and off. All right, so let's bring that overdrive back in. Let's do something very similar to what we just did with the overdrive. So I'm going to set the wet to 100%. Right click, group, create a group/instrument rack over here, create chain. So this chain is the overdrive. This chain is the dry signal. So I'm going to bring the overdrive signal down, and I'm going to slowly bring in the overdrive while listening to the dry chain down here until it sounds good. I'm going to turn it on and off just to hear what it sounds like. I'm going to bring this down. There's a bit more presence there, or some other word that you'll use to describe it. Let's turn this audio effect back on. All right, so now we're getting groovy. I want to actually, let's right click group. So we're just getting groupie over here. And I want to mix that in. So instead of doing all this with like weird routing and sends and stuff like that, I'm doing it all within audio effect racks. And it does something pretty cool with the sound there. And this is all, a lot of this is exaggerated, just for the sake of the video. So yeah, what have we done here? We've added a bit of warmth, but we've also added a bit of harmonics. So let's just drop in an EQ, gently shave. All right, so now we're getting into mixing EQ and things like that. And, you know, I guess I'll top this off with the glue compressor. Now, compressing, it's one of those things you can easily overdo. And I find what works best is just compressing a little bit. Maybe 1 or 2 dB. Obviously, if you're like slamming drums, you know, that doesn't apply. Let's just bring the threshold down just a tiny bit. That's a little bit too much. And what you do is you have a compressor in series. And also, there's a wet dry knob here. I just want to jump back. You can also mix in a bit of the dry signal, just a tiny bit, depending on the type of flavor you're looking for. And that's another subtle way, a little tiny thing you can add that will accumulate to a bigger sound. So let's kind of continue here. So we got something with a bit of an attack here, so the transients come through. Let's add another one that'll just kind of ride the audio. So this is a compression in series. as opposed to parallel. We'll just turn off the makeup and then just bring the attack down. Give ourselves an interesting kind of slower release. And let's just get crazy here. Group. See, groups are really awesome. This is like, you know, a bunch of things going on at once. Not too extreme, but as they accumulate, it's a bigger sound. And I think I've maybe demonstrated this. Maybe I'm beating the very large quadruped, but that's okay. So, yeah, you know what? You can do this, in any way that you want. I do them in groups these days, but feel free to kind of do them, especially in Ableton Live 10 now. You can do them in separate channels, and then from there, you can have things happening in parallel, and then you can mix them kind of visually all at once. And from there, you can group them. And there's no limit to group. I mean, like audio channel groups up here, right? Not to be confused with audio effect racks, which I also call groups. And I know I shouldn't, but I do anyway because I'm a thug. If you haven't noticed, also you have an excellent control of panning. If that gives you any ideas, you can have multiple effects, kind of subtle, but with separate panning, which is another way to kind of subtly change and shift how the stereo image comes across. If you do it subtly, it'll add to your sound here. And from here, you might be like, okay, well, what else can I do? Well, there's this magical, wonderful world of VSTs and these interesting channel strips that exist that just by existing add a little bit of color to your sound as well, very subtly. So you can have, one or two of these, and then from there you can get into the time-based effects like, I don't know, echo or a simple delay or something like that, which you can use even, subtly or exaggerated. And, all these things contribute to a sound. And I'll just give you an example. So all these like everything we've done can be turned on and off by one knob. Let's just listen to that one last time. Bit of presence on the high end, a little bit of something going on there. And it sounds neat. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. Hope it wasn't rambly. It's been 18 minutes, but I hope you learned stuff. Take care and have a good one.